This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the next hour, we're going to be running through all the stories you need to know about as far as business is concerned in Africa and beyond. Let's start with a quick run through the market here for you, wrapping up with a look at trading during the week. The EGX30 not trading today, but it's had a very solid run so far in the second half of the year. In fact, in that period of time, it's up over 10%. To the close on Thursday, back to levels we saw last in April and most of the first quarter. Now, the trend broadly in Nigeria has been consistent decline so far in 2019. Nigeria is important. We're going to be talking about a proposal to raise the VAT rate over there to 7.2%. We'll be asking what's really different this time round in Nigeria's long-running quest to boost its non-oil tax revenues. Here's what's coming up tonight. Nigeria proposes a 200 basis point VAT increase to boost non-oil revenues. The UK's Prime Minister is still optimistic about a Brexit deal ahead of his meeting with EU officials. And we'll tell you how deforestation is threatening the ancient art form of making fabric out of tree bark in Uganda. All that and more is in the pipeline for you tonight. But let's start in Nigeria, where authorities have announced plans to increase the country's value-added tax rate to 7.2%. Now, the move is part of a broader strategy to try and wean Africa's biggest oil producer away from its long and heavy reliance on revenue from oil and gas sales. Nigeria's value-added tax rate is currently at 5%. That's right, 5%. It's one of the lowest rates in the world. It's payable on goods and services consumed by any person, from government agencies to individuals. Last year, the West African economy raised $17 billion in taxes. For comparison, Kenya, with a quarter of the population, raised $15 billion in taxes. However, it now looks to be doubling that figure. Raising taxes, though, still remains Nigeria's key challenge, with most of its businesses simply not being on the grid. All right, then, so let's examine this in a bit more detail. Taiwo Oyedele is a partner and West African tax leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers. He joins us now live from Lagos tonight. Taiwo, thank you very much for your time this evening. Assuming legislators agree to raise the VAT rate, as the finance minister is proposing, how much of this 220 basis point raise as far as revenues is concerned? Right, then it seems it's having a bit of a problem with that link over to Lagos. We'll try and clean that up and get back to it as soon as we can. Still in Nigeria, though, the familiar threat of seasonal flooding is raising concerns yet again. Some parts of the country have already been hit, and the Emergency Management Agency is warning residents to be on high alert. With the details, here's CGTN's Daniela Pearson.
This is Lokogoma, a small area in Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. Recently, it experienced flash floods causing heavy traffic as cars forced their way through the water. According to the United Nations Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs Office, floods have engulfed several areas in the northeast of the country, affecting over 3,000 people. The situation needs urgent attention.
The government, they need to do something, equip them well, let them come to here, establish their outpost as an office to make sure they have a proper drainage. For me, I think this drainage here is very small for the kind of flood that's passing through here.
Maybe you check towards the back past ages, maybe some 10 years ago, what is the strength of the flood? Then you begin to construct your culvert, not just to do it anyhow, but to do the culvert according to the volume of flood that comes here. That will solve the problem.
Last year, some 200 people died as a result of floods, and over 500,000 were displaced. The Abuja Emergency Management Agency has warned that heavy floods may occur again. A list of areas at risk has also been made available by the agency.
Definitely, we should expect more flooding because what we saw before was just an urban flooding. What we are expecting in the next few or 3 weeks to come is the river flooding. And so people should be wary of that. We are prepared fully even before the rainfall, because it's part of our work to make sure that we prepared ahead of time.
Poor drainage systems in many areas are a major cause of flooding. Motorists and residents will need to be on high alert to avoid getting swept away by the impending calamity. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
All right, we're still in Nigeria. Let's revisit our lead story. A proposal from the Finance Ministry over there to essentially raise the VAT rate, the rate of value-added tax, from the low rate of 5% all the way to 7.2%. But will this really work this time round and help in weaning Nigeria of its long dependence on revenue from oil and gas sales? Let's find out. Taiwo Oyedele is a partner in the West African tax leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers, live in Lagos tonight. Thank you very much for your time. Assuming legislators do agree to this increase, as the finance minister is asking for, how much would it raise as far as revenue is concerned?
Yeah, in 2018, Nigeria raised 1.1 trillion naira in VAT, and that's somewhere around a little less than $3 billion. If we are able to perform at the same level, because sometimes when you increase tax rates, the collection might even go down in terms of people who comply. But everything being equal, Nigeria will be able to raise 480 billion naira. Which is a little over $1 billion.
Right, but is this, from a political perspective, is this tax hike likely to get approval from legislators, or are they broadly opposed to any tax hike of any sort?
We have a new National Assembly now that are more willing to work with the executive, not like the previous National Assembly. So I wouldn't say that they are opposed to increase in tax rates. It's also going to be premature to say they're going to just approve it. What I think is going to happen is the lawmakers are likely to say, why do you want to increase the rate to 7.2%? And what else are you going to give in terms of palliatives? Because once you can give the assurance that the poorest people will be protected, and businesses will be protected, but you only want the middle class and the upper class to pay a little bit more, I think that would be okay for the lawmakers to approve.
Right, but is the finance minister just proposing to raise the broad VAT rate to 7.2%, or is she proposing a much broader overhaul of the value-added tax law to provide for tax credits, for instance, on inputs and capital expenditures, while drastically cutting exemptions?
Yes, it's a combination of increase in rates and also some reforms, but I would not say that reforms are going to be drastic at this time, because the increase in rates, it's only a little over 2%. Government wants to ensure that whatever reforms they want to carry out does not result in a reduction in VAT collection. So which means, for example, if you're going to give full credit for capital investment as well as full credit for input VAT on services, you may end up with lower VAT collection without a significant increase in rates.
Right.
So some of the reforms will come through at this time with the increase to 7.2%. Some of them will come in later on.
Right, but given what we know, because looking at the data that we saw from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, quoted by the IMF, in fact, last year, they pointed out that even though there are 1.5 million businesses registered to be paying VAT, only 5% of them were actually filing any returns. I mean, that's an abysmally low compliance rate. Why does that compliance problem exist?
Yeah, so compliance with taxes in Nigeria is very low because the tax morale is very low. Nigerians don't trust their government. They also don't trust tax officials. So generally, compliance in Nigeria is low, but particularly for VAT, I do think that the majority of people in the tax net have no business being there in the first place. In Nigeria, we do not have a threshold for VAT. So what that means is even if your business only generates $20 a month, you have to go and register, pay VAT, including people who hawk businesses on the street, roadside mechanic, tailors, and all of that. So these guys are not going to comply anyway. It's to be expected that majority of people in the VAT net do not have the capacity to comply.
Right. Is the compliance problem, as you point out, just limited to the informal economy or also the large taxpayers as well? Because going back to the data that the IMF was pointing to, they said compliance is a problem pretty much across the board for small businesses and for larger taxpayers too.
Yes, I would agree.
Unfortunately, we've lost that line over to Lagos. Taiwo Edele there from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Now, let's move over to East Africa, where the World Bank has lifted the aid embargo to Tanzania. It's approved a $450 million loan to the country. Now, this signals the release of the first tranche of funds worth about $1.7 billion that were frozen following concerns about government policies. The proposed government actions include passing a law barring the questioning of official statistics and the expulsion of pregnant girls from public schools. In efforts to raise the country's human capital index, which is currently 0.4, the government has implemented a range of measures designed to boost economic output and productivity. Ideally, all of this ought to be financed by the grant approved by the World Bank's International Development Assistance Program. Right, then run through some company news now. Let's start with Nigeria. Africa's largest natural gas plant operator, Nigeria LNG, is in talks with lenders to finance a $10 billion expansion. If successful, the raised funding will go towards building the gas plant's 7th train that's expected to increase the country's LNG output by 40%. Also in the business of aviation, Africa's most profitable carrier, and frankly the only profitable carrier at this point in time, Ethiopian Airlines, saw a big rise in its operating revenue in the year ending in June 2019. The flag carrier's operating revenue rose by 17% in that period of time. At the same time, its passenger numbers are also up 14%, offsetting the impact of fuel costs, which are up by over 20%. And for the second time in nearly 3 months, the ride-hailing giant Uber is cutting jobs again. Now, this time it's across its engineering and product teams, following an earlier round of cuts in July. Uber says its latest workforce reduction of roughly 435 positions was done to eliminate overlapping and underperformance as well. And finally, the world's largest food supplier, Nestle, has launched a new packaging institute in a bid to reduce plastic waste. The institute will work to create packaging that's much easier to recycle. At the moment, Nestle is working to achieve its stated goal of making 100% of its packaging recyclable or reusable by 2025. That's a run through your company headlines. It's time for a short break. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. Hundreds of people protest against gender-based violence and femicide, specifically outside the Joburg Stock Exchange. And Kenya is hosting the largest auto show in East Africa. We'll take you inside next.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how whole stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Sandton earlier today outside the Joburg Stock Exchange, raising awareness about gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. The protesters started to gather in the wee hours of the morning, with cases of women and child abuse in the country rising. Many are now calling for the government to declare a state of emergency. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has that story.
South African women are taking a stand. From 3 a.m., hundreds of women and some men started pouring into the Sandton CBD to stage a massive protest outside the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. The gathering is under the banner of #Sandton Shutdown to highlight the scourge of gender-based violence. The protest comes just a day after national crime stats indicated that violent crimes and murder had significantly worsened.
We're asking the JSE to impose a 2% levy on all JSE-listed entities to actually help towards the GBV fund that needs to actually champion the cause of gender-based violence.
The choice of the protest venue is deliberate, as Sandton is Africa's richest square mile. And these protesters say corporate South Africa are not innocent bystanders in the war on women, and that they must be held to account. At the break of dawn, traffic had come to a standstill here in Sandton, an intended consequence, of course, as these protesters, mostly women, want everybody in South Africa to stand up and deal with the issue of women abuse.
Enough is enough, and we have to get them where it hurts, and they don't want to listen, so hopefully they'll feel it by shutting down a business centre.
Sandton is where all the money is, where everyone's working, and we need to make a big impact. We need to make a change, and this is the only way we're going to do it.
I'm here to represent the women with disabilities, to let the society that even though we are disabled, we are not the invite for them to kill us. We are not the invite for them to rape us.
We're here to fight against the injustice towards women who have been raped in our country. It's become a national crisis at this point, and we need to fight against it with all we've got.
It's our civil duty to act as a people against gender-based and race-based crimes. And coming together as a community is important to make the change that we need.
I feel that it's important just to unify, and like the more people we are, the louder our voices will be heard.
The protesters will continue to occupy the Sandton streets for the rest of the day this Friday. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, the South African listed insurer Old Mutual's battle against the company's CEO, Peter Moyo, is still well underway. The CEO has been fired twice and every time he's challenged his dismissal in court. Now, a letter issued by lawyers representing Old Mutual has emerged, indicating the company's efforts to de-escalate this very public tiff. It's also acknowledged that Moyo would continue to work from home for the company, at least until the legal process has been completed. However, that is a contention that Old Mutual has rejected.
We haven't wanted to be in the courts, and we don't want to continue in the courts forever and a day. I think that we look at the appeal opportunity with a great deal of confidence, and perhaps that changes the matter for all time. But the matter must come to a conclusion. That is fundamentally important for everybody associated with this, certainly on the inside of Old Mutual. The share price needs to pick up, and I think people need the confidence, which is why I'm saying our interest as the board, along with all of the stakeholders, is a long-term interest. There's no glory in getting into a sort of street fight about something as though it'll end tomorrow.
And as far as the performance of the company shares are concerned, it closed 1.7% higher today, but over the full year, it's actually a lot lower by about 10% so far in the year. Further north, the head of the Arab Chambers of Commerce, Khaled Hanafi, has announced that Egypt's exports to China have risen by 60% year on year in 2018. Chinese exports have also hit the $10 billion mark. With the details, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
China is a main supplier of goods to Egypt. The high quality and competitive pricing has tipped the balance of trade in China's favor. Chinese exports to Egypt has exceeded $10 billion. Though still far off, Egypt's exports have seen a significant 60% boom in 2018. Egypt sends ceramics and granite as well as minerals to China, but the bulk of exports are agricultural products.
Citrus fruits are one of the main exports, about 100,000 tons per year to China. Grapes are also another growing export. We export various vegetables as well. The Chinese market is one of the most important for us. There are strong ties with China and different partnerships with Chinese companies to raise bilateral trade.
The Egyptian government has placed stringent rules on producers to ensure the products conform to international standards. This has opened the door for more markets, including China.
We established a coding system. We supervise every step in every registered farm in agriculture. The whole process, starting from the seeds to the final product to the exporting process, are well monitored. It enables us to spot any mistakes from producers and solve it immediately. The aim is to maintain a good reputation of Egypt's agricultural brand in the markets.
A deal was also signed in August, making Egypt the first country to export fresh dates to China. In spite of the 60% increase this year, Egypt's exports to China are only $700 million, compared to $10 billion of Chinese exports to Egypt. The government here hopes to raise this number significantly in the next few years. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Kenya is hosting the region's largest automotive exhibition. It's called Auto Parts East Africa. It seeks to highlight the latest tech trends in a range of categories, from auto parts to electronic systems to accessories, among others. From the Kenyan capital, here's our resident petrol head, CGTN's Robert Nagela.
The automotive industry in Kenya has grown exponentially over the last decade. Motor vehicle sales in Kenya grew by 18% in 2018, with over 14,000 new cars sold and about 90,000 second-hand vehicles imported in the same period. It's with this in mind that Nairobi is playing host to Eastern Central Africa's largest automotive industry event. Several of the companies showcasing their hardware and accessories are from China.
All of our products are only for heavy-duty trucks. One is for brake lining and one is for rubber parts. And the third part is for high-strength wheel bolts.
The firm's representative says there's been a good reception to their products.
We have some customers, for example, Isuzu customers is very professional to us. They are very interested in our break-in-annings, and they also leave samples for us.
Some of the latest innovations in vehicle technology is on display here, from mechanical parts, sound accessories and car care products.
We are distributor of 3M automotive film, which people know very well as tint. Not only tint, but we also distribute car care products.
Some of the products on display are manufactured locally, an indication of just how much the motor vehicle industry has grown over time.
We do manufacture, for example, these filters. They're locally manufactured, everything. We've got them, it's been about 20 years we've been doing this.
The government of President Uhuru Kenyatta has pledged to promote the automotive industry. Already, Volkswagen and Peugeot have set up plants in the country where they produce some of their latest models. And with several motoring events, including the Concours d'Elegance, a classic motoring event, and the Total Motor Show on the annual calendar, organizers are hoping this event, dubbed Autoparts East Africa, will be a permanent fixture going forward. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
It's time for a break. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. We'll explore why the UK's Prime Minister says he's optimistic about getting a Brexit deal out of his meeting with the EU. And France threatens to leave the EU trade deal with Mercosur unless Brazil protects the Amazon.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's recap the stories making your headlines at this hour. Zimbabwe's former president, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, will be laid to rest on Sunday in the capital, Harare. His body arrived in Zimbabwe on Wednesday. He's been lying in state after the government announced 3 days of national mourning. Elsewhere, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says that the country is committed to rooting out xenophobia and xenophobic attacks. Now, the violence that has engulfed the country in the past few weeks was sparked by the killing of a taxi driver in the capital, Pretoria. And Sudan's new Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, is in South Sudan on a 2-day visit. Hamdok's visit aims to cement a new plan for peace talks with many of the rebel groups fighting against the government. Those are your headlines on CGTN. Right now, let's shift to Brexit matters. The British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, says he will not be deterred by anyone from leaving the EU on the 31st of October. Earlier this week, the British Parliament passed a law that effectively forces the Prime Minister to ask for an extension if he doesn't get a deal. But the Prime Minister says he would rather be dead in a ditch, quite literally, than ask for an extension.
We are going to... I certainly won't be deterred by anybody from our goal of coming out of the EU on October the 31st, which is, I think, what the people in this country want us to do, and they want us to get Brexit done. I believe they do. But I also won't be deterred from getting on with our domestic agenda. And I think the people in this country also want to hear, yes, it is absolutely true that the opposition parties don't particularly want to have an election, nor do they want to deliver Brexit, and I have to face that reality at the present. But what people want is to hear how we're going to get on and deliver on their priorities.
Now, the Amazon, the enormous rainforest that it is, has been in the spotlight ever since data released in August revealed the fires burning the rainforest at an unprecedented record rate. The fires have created an international public outcry and accusations that the country's president, Jair Bolsonaro, encouraged and allowed greater deforestation. CGTN's Paulo Cabral takes up the story.
Brazil is one of the world's biggest food suppliers, a top exporter of agricultural commodities like grains and beef, but at what environmental cost does this come? The recent fires in the Amazon brought this question to light globally. In the international political arena, French President Emmanuel Macron sounded perhaps the loudest alarm, adding the fires as an emergency topic to a G7 summit meeting in France, while Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro took offense to what he called Macron's colonialist mentality and remained defiant.
The wildfires in the Amazon, in my understanding, may be partially due to the action of the NGOs that did it to create problems for Brazil, because they have been losing money.
As pressure mounted, Brazilian authorities softened their rhetoric and pledged to protect the Amazon. But allies of Bolsonaro, like the São Paulo state deputy and vice president of the Brazilian Association of Soy Producers, say that will happen on Brazil's terms and not due to foreign pressure.
Nós vimos que tem muito holofote.
What we have seen is that a spotlight was thrown on something that is usual, that happens every year. Our problem in Brazil are the environmental groups that manipulate people just to create a smoke screen to hide the true commercial interests behind all this.
The pictures of the forest burning have already caused some economic backlash. No ban on Brazilian soybeans or beef, the main commodities produced in the region, but two big fashion companies, H&M and VF Corporation, have decided to temporarily stop buying leather from Brazil. The ban is not expected to have a significant financial impact here, but it does carry much symbolic weight and contributes to a negative image of the country abroad.
It's not yet clear what the impact in practice will be. None of Brazil's really big buyers have stopped purchases. We cannot rule that out, but it didn't happen so far, and they would have had time to do so already, as it happened in the past, after all the allegations against Brazilian beef.
Some farmers argue there's been an overreaction in international public opinion, in part thanks to Bolsonaro's aggressive rhetoric that does not reflect what has been happening on the ground. But environmentalists argue it is precisely the government's policies of pulling back protections of the Amazon that's reflected in the fires and higher deforestation figures.
4 or 5 years ago, the Brazilians were convinced that, oh, finally we are going to stop Amazon deforestation. We can even win this battle. Is being undermined by the last figures. And the last figures are a consequence of a series of events. Reduction of governance.
As the dry season continues, wildfires are still raging in many parts of the Amazon. There's some action being taken to control them, but as massive as they are, the reality is there's not much more that can be done than wait for the rains to come in November. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, São Paulo.
Now, still on Brazil, the French President Emmanuel Macron says France can no longer support EU trade with the Southern American Common Market unless Brazil takes measures to protect the Amazon. This trade treaty between the two sides was painstakingly negotiated over more than 2 decades, but now it seems to be at the point of collapse. And this comes as EU finance ministers are set to discuss scrapping the deal entirely at a meeting in Helsinki. CGTN's Elena Casas has this report.
Philippe Dufour farms a herd of 200 Blondes d'Aquitaine beef cattle in the Seine-et-Marne region near Paris. He says the price of beef has barely risen in the 30 years he's owned the farm. Farmers like Philippe, who are already struggling financially, fear the recently negotiated trade deal between the EU and the Mercosur countries of South America could be the last straw.
We're talking about increasing imports to Europe of sirloin steak, which is our highest value product and which will disturb a market that is already very difficult for us. So we're going to see sirloin arriving in Europe at €7 a kilo when we're selling it at 15.
Beef is one of Brazil and Argentina's biggest exports, and the Mercosur deal will allow 60,000 tonnes of it to be imported into Europe tax-free each year, and a further 99,000 tonnes taxed at just 7.5%, when the EU's tariff on beef coming from countries without a trade deal is a whopping 84%. South American beef is also mostly intensively farmed, while European farmers are subject to strict norms on animal welfare and bans on antibiotics and hormone treatments.
The rules oblige us to make expensive investments and generally cause us to lose profitability. So if we not only have to deal with that, but with competition that doesn't follow the rules and can produce 50% cheaper, that is going to be dramatic for us.
The risk of meat being imported that's been treated with chemicals banned in Europe has also sparked food safety fears. The French Agriculture Ministry says all imports will need to keep to minimum standards of traceability and animal welfare, but beef farmers aren't convinced. The French Farmers Federation says almost a third of beef farmers in the country could go out of business if the EU-Mercosur deal is ratified in its current form. That's looking increasingly unlikely. At the G7 summit, President Emmanuel Macron said France couldn't support the deal if Brazil continued to let the Amazon rainforest burn, something environmentalists say is partly caused by deliberate fires laid to clear land for cattle farming. Although he's only cited environmental concerns, Mr. Macron's government has been feeling the pressure from protesting farmers all summer. Without support from all 27 EU countries, the deal will be dead.
I think that the deal cannot be simply adjusted or slightly revised, or a couple of provisions can be added to it. I think you have to put the whole thing back on the table.
The agreement was welcomed by the EU as a historic achievement less than 3 months ago. But, as often here in France, discontent on the farm has helped push the government into a U-turn. Elena Casas, CGTN, Seine-et-Marne, France.
Still on matters trade, but in a different arena altogether, the US President Donald Trump says he will delay plans to impose an additional 5% duty on some $250 billion worth of Chinese goods until the 15th of October. According to Mr. Trump, this tariff pushback is a gesture of goodwill, he says. It should help mend the seriously damaged ties between the world's top two economies. CGTN's Jim Spellman explains.
Signs of optimism in the U.S.-China trade conflict. Late Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump delayed a 5% tariff increase on some Chinese-made products from October 1st to October 15th, pushed back to avoid coinciding with the 70th anniversary of the formation of the People's Republic of China. President Trump calls it a goodwill gesture. The delay comes after China exempted some U.S. products from its increased tariffs.
I think they did the right thing. I think it was good for them, but they took them off. Yeah, I think it was a gesture, okay? But it was a big move. People were shocked. I wasn't shocked. But I deal with them, and I know them, and I like them, and I hope we can do something.
The delayed U.S. tariffs were warmly received in Beijing, and officials suggest Chinese firms may buy more U.S. agriculture products, including pork and soybeans.
We welcome the goodwill actions released by the United States. As far as I know, Chinese companies have started to inquire about prices for U.S. agriculture goods purchased. We hope that the two sides will continue to meet each other halfway and take practical actions to create favorable conditions for the consultation.
Bloomberg News is reporting the Trump administration is considering a short-term deal with China that would see the U.S. roll back or delay some tariffs in exchange for reassurances from China over intellectual property protections, plus increased agricultural purchases. But the White House is pushing back against this, saying no such deal is being considered. Jim Spellman, CGTN at the White House.
Now, newly released data indicates that 1 in 3 motorbike riders in Thailand have no license whatsoever. Thailand currently holds the highest percentage of motorcycle deaths around the world as young people continue to be at risk. Now, as part of efforts to mitigate those risks, instruction courses for high school students are now being launched. CGTN's correspondent Martin Lowe reports.
High speed, complacency and a lack of law enforcement have all been blamed for Thailand's appalling motorbike carnage. But now there's another reason. Figures have revealed 1 in 3 bike riders doesn't have a license. Thailand has 21 million registered motorbikes, but only just over 13 million riders have passed a test and hold licenses. This in a country with the highest percentage of bike deaths in the world. On average, 68 people are killed on Thai roads every day, almost 3/4 of them bike riders.
I'm concerned that children are being killed under the age of 15 when they have no rights to ride motorbikes. Half of the riders over 15 who have accidents don't have licenses. Most learn how to ride from family, friends or by themselves, so they lack the knowledge to ride safely.
Now the Thai government is providing motorcycle instruction at high schools. It's launched a $900,000 US scheme to train young riders.
I think this is a good idea because it helps youngsters who don't have licenses to learn how to ride properly. But we need to focus on the quality of riding, not just the number of people having licenses.
The target is to bring 51,000 high school students up to a standard where they can pass a test and obtain a license. It's common here in Thailand to see children riding motorbikes to school, well below the legal age to hold a license. Also 3 or 4 youngsters on the same bike, rarely wearing helmets. It seems there's often a casual disregard for road safety. Instructors hope teaching riding skills can help more young people obtain a proper license, but more importantly, reduce the shocking toll of injury and death on the country's roads. Martin Lowe, CGTN, Bangkok.
Now then, artificial intelligence and facial recognition, they're really among the new frontiers in the tech we use every day. But the potential for their misuse and the absence of regulations as far as laws are concerned is deeply worrisome. So to fix this, in part, over 1,500 delegates from 18 countries attended the second edition of the Tech Law Fest in Singapore. CGTN's Mirulu was there. She filed this report.
Fake news, data security, and artificial intelligence. These keywords were in focus at Tech Law 2019 in Singapore. The conference saw the legal and tech communities come together to discuss the need for stronger regulations in this data-driven age. And who better to talk about tech and data than the creator of the World Wide Web? Sir Tim Berners-Lee called for increased efforts to reduce fake news and data misuse.
Always when you have technology, you also have to have policy. So we will need, and then it will become more important, when I'm trusting, when I have the ability to give you access to huge amounts of data myself, also we really need good laws. That human touch.
Concerns raised by Sir Tim seem pertinent in light of the recent global debate over the use of AI-driven facial recognition technology. The latest app sparks security concerns is Zao, a face swap app created by Chinese online dating platform Momo. Zao enables users to upload images, and then its AI engine swaps their faces with those of celebrities in a wide range of films and videos. After topping Chinese App Store immediately after its launch, the app quickly received a massive backlash as privacy implications began to sink in. This prompted Zao to update its terms and conditions and issue an apology. Zao is just the tip of the iceberg. Social media giant Facebook recently turned off its auto tag suggestion feature. Users who want to use the feature will now have to specifically choose to opt in. Abuse of data, especially in the area of facial recognition, continues to occupy center stage in the minds of governments and legal experts alike.
We need to bring regulators, lawyers, policymakers, and technologists together because no single one of those can solve the issues that come from face recognition. So it depends on the use that you're going to make of that data.
Experts believe that key challenges remain before concrete legal remedies can be finalized to prevent misuse of AI-backed applications.
The biggest challenge with the governance of AI and AI-driven technologies is the fact that you're dealing with the absence of a human actor. So it's about reining in and controlling at one level the people that make this technology possible and making sure that they're held to account.
Surely a lot needs to be done to regulate facial recognition technology to limit its misuse by authorities as well as the public. But the recent debate over Zao and other facial recognition apps goes to show that more people are increasingly aware and less willing to trade privacy over convenience and entertainment. Miro Lu, CGTN, Singapore.
The restaurant industry is evolving pretty fast. Mobile devices have made ordering a lot easier than ever. And you could say that convenience has sort of spoiled us, but it's also fueled a growing demand for speedy on-demand service. CGTN's Mark New has the details on the growth of the virtual restaurant on What's Hot tonight.
At Top Round Roast Beef, the staff is busy making its signature sandwich to serve a restaurant teeming with customers. But at the very same kitchen, they're also busy preparing delivery orders for Red Ribbon Chicken, TR Burgers and Wings, and Ice Cream Custard by Top Round. These three brands only exist online. They're virtual restaurants.
If you're at home, you're looking for something to order. If you want burgers, you're searching burgers. Which Top Round isn't going to show up under burgers. You know, Top Round is its own little niche as far as roast beef sandwiches. But then if you're ordering fried chicken sandwiches, you're going to type in fried chicken. And if you're searching ice cream, you're going to type in ice cream. So from a brand perspective, everything has its own identity. So there's essentially 4 times the opportunity to get an order.
Top Round Roast Beef used to close at 9 in the evening. Now it's open till 2 in the morning. And between the hours of 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., 95% of the deliveries occur. Uber Eats first approached Top Round a year ago to join its app delivery service and spin off various virtual restaurants. Today, Top Round uses at least 5 different delivery services, including DoorDash and Postmates. This man delivers for Grubhub and Caviar, where he says he can make close to $25 an hour, including tips. Mohammed Al-Madani delivers for Uber Eats 6 to 8 hours a day.
Flexibility. Yeah, I can work anytime I want. Like, it's my main source of income, you know?
no restaurant wants to get into that delivery business. It's an awful part of their business. They just want to focus on getting customers. They want to get takeout. They want to handle delivery somewhere else. They're happy to give a cut to those delivery services. The problem is you need economies of scale. You need density for those services to work. So it turns out that same driver, maybe having 3 different badges on them, that's really what's going to happen.
The virtual restaurant market has also resulted in ghost kitchens, like this one in Pasadena, California, called Kitchen United. Numerous online restaurants only share the kitchen facilities to fulfill their delivery orders. Kitchen United does have a small dining area where customers can come in for service too.
It's a decentralized approach, just like the same way you look at Uber or you look at Lyft in terms of the ride-sharing services. There's a lot of extra capacity that's sitting out there, so we're going to see a lot of ghost kitchens emerge. And you also might see the model that actually happens in airline food service, right, or in large institutional food service, where everything's made in one place and it's done cook chill and then delivered somewhere else.
Lopez says he's not a fan of the ghost kitchen concept because he likes to make sure he still has a direct connection with his customers. But he admits the industry is changing rapidly as delivery orders now account for 75% of his business. Work News, CGTN, San Francisco.
Quick run through commodity prices for you now. Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the OPEC members that's not been complying with agreed to production cuts. And yesterday, though, they said they will adhere to the cuts agreed to. But look at the data here. After falling marginally between the fourth quarter of 2018 and the first quarter of this year, Nigeria's output rose by almost 3%. In fact, last month, it added 127,000 barrels a day of output compared to the fourth quarter average. Between July and August, an extra 87,000 barrels or so coming into the market. So will Nigeria cut? And if so, by how much? We'll find out and update you. Time for another break. We'll be back shortly with more.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head over to Uganda now, where craftsmen are campaigning now to save the ancient art form of making fabric out of tree bark. The traditional fabric is under threat due to the rapid destruction of trees that produce the raw material needed to make bark cloth. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga spent a day with the craftsmen and filed this report for us on Grassroots.
Turning tree barks into bark cloth, Bukenya is creating the traditional African fabric.
The demand for bark cloth on the international market is increasing, and we are also protecting our heritage.
Bark cloth making is an ancient tradition for the Baganda people in central Uganda. It is still used in traditional drays for royals and special ceremonies. Bukenya has been harvesting the inner bark of this tree to make bark cloth for 40 years. He's now training young people on how to do it and also working to protect the tradition. To make the material soft, it is boiled before hammering it into shape.
I've acquired enough skill through this training. I can make a standard bark cloth piece and get paid.
A finished product costs between $10 and $100 US. They sell their products locally and also export to Europe. Designers are now making new fabrics and art pieces out of them. However, these craftsmen are worried that the source of their raw material, the mutuba tree, is under threat. Most of the tree species have been cut down for firewood.
The tree is under threat, almost under extinction, replaced with other trees, funny trees like eucalyptus and pine. But we need to make extra effort to ensure that at a time when other people are promoting other trees, we also can figure out how to push in these trees so that they can start promoting it.
Working with the local government, the craftsmen have now started a campaign to encourage locals plant the mutuba tree. Through this, they hope to save the backcloth tradition, but also improve on their household incomes. Hilara Isiga, CGTN, Bukoman Simbi, Central Uganda.
One final story for you. With summer coming to an end, it's school season in Egypt. Over 2 million students are on a shopping spree as the academic year for 2019-2020 kicks off. CGTN's Yasir Kim explores how students are welcoming the new school year from Cairo.
It's that time of year again. Parents scrap to prepare everything their children need for school. It's an exciting time for students buying new gear, but a burden on the parents.
I have 4 kids. I bought the stuff for one of them so far and will continue shopping for the other 3. There's everything here, with a good variety in quality, prices and brands. I like the school bags here.
This trade show in Cairo is one of many around the country that sells school stationery at discounted prices.
There's a discount of 25 to 30%. I bought pencils and pens, pencil sharpeners, a lunchbox and bags. Actually, most of the stuff I bought from here. It's only the uniform that I bought from elsewhere.
The government provides the location and everything here for free to the shops and the traders. In return, we sell at wholesale prices for the consumer so they can afford what they need and they live happy.
According to CAPMAS, there are 64,000 schools in Egypt and just over 23 million school students in 2018, a 3.3% rise than the year before. Egyptian-made products alone couldn't cover this growing demand, so a lot of stationery is imported as well.
Most of our imported products are from China because the quality of Chinese goods are high with good price, so it's suitable for the Egyptian market. There are also new designs and ideas from China every year. They develop themselves and remain competitive. That's why they are the #1 in the Egyptian market.
What makes this year significant is that for the first time, prices are lower than the year before. It's because of the strengthening of the Egyptian pound, which has reduced the cost of imports, and this has pushed prices of goods down and lifted the burden of the low-income earners. Yes Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
One last thing to clear up on the bulletin, a run through the currencies. So Zambia did cut its growth forecast for the year pretty much in half, down to 2%. The earlier forecast was 4%. The president in a speech to parliament basically cited adverse weather and the subsequent hit that'll have on energy and agriculture for the reason for the revision. Remember, its currency has been under a fair bit of pressure. It's lost about half a percentage point to the American dollar just in September alone. Over there, it's actually slid by about 10%. Also today, for those of you interested in yield, AFC announced successful issuance of a samurai loan. Biggest issue apparently, biggest ever issue by an African issuer. 2 tranches, 3 years each. It raised $233 million and 1 billion yen as well on each of those tranches. That's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content that you've seen here in the last hour or so. Several ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.